right, so we've got something different in here today. This is a 350Z Nismo, a real Nismo, with the HR engine in it. You can tell because 2 throttle bodies. So, quick little story about this. That 300ZX that we built, this is actually his son's car. He bought this already built by somebody who didn't do the greatest job in the world. It's always had performance issues. It's not making any power. We actually did a couple dyno pulls a few weeks ago with it to see what was going on with it. And it made a whopping, I think, 300 horsepower, which when you see the size of the turbo, you're gonna be like, what? So it's not set up great. It's a rear mount turbo system, which is why you see intercooler and no turbos up here. It's extremely laggy, doesn't make full boost until 6,000 RPM right now. We're gonna try to fix that. But the big thing is, he's on a budget and the mass airflow sensors are maxed out. When we did the polls last month or whenever it was, I just watched the data log because he didn't want me to tune it. He just wanted to check the tune that was on it, and it's atrocious. The mass airflow sensors are maxed out. It's bouncing off 5 volts at 6,000 RPM when the boost comes on. It's not set up right. It needs larger MAFs, which costs a lot of money to get the up rev ones. I think they're like $300 or $400 a piece, plus tuning, plus all the other stuff. So what we're gonna do is I actually invented a little device, which if you watch my videos, you'll know I've been working on converting the jukes to speed density. Now, this car really needs a standalone. I'm gonna say that up front. The difficulty is the HRs, there are no like bolt-in standalone ECUs for these. You can't plop in a regular 350Z because the harnesses are different. Obviously, it's different throttle body setup, mass, all dual VVT instead of single. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna convert this car to speed density. And this is the device we're going to use. So we put a MAP sensor that reads off the intake manifold. We run 5 volt from one of the MAFs to power this thing up. We run 5 volt off of the other MAF to power the MAP sensor. We read in our MAF sensor reading, and then we modify the output to move the MAF down and scale the whole thing. This car is making, I want to say it's like 7 pounds of boost. That's all it's going to make. We're not out to make crazy power. We're going to see if this works, and we're going to see if we can get this thing running and driving correctly. Those are the goals of this. So now let me show you the turbo system. So I had mentioned that this wasn't set up the greatest. So this is a mass airflow car. The PCV system routing is not good for that. We have an open vent catch can, which it's great that there's a catch can. It's venting to atmosphere, which obviously is an issue for a mass airflow car. It's a giant crankcase vacuum leak. It has all sorts of crazy stuff on it. We've got oil pressure regulator for reasons. We've got back here what appears to be a fuel pressure regulator. And then we have like a damper with a gauge on it. I don't know. It is running a very cheap boost controller, which we're probably just gonna bypass. The boost controller should be back with the turbo. It's just a lot of stuff. It's got a janky meth injection system that it doesn't need because it's not making enough power to justify that. Pump gas will handle it fine. You know, I'm all about using these containers. It's just the electronics aren't great. It's and the kid that owns it didn't do this. I want to be clear. He knows it needs work, which is why it's here. It's got a knockoff HKS blow-off valve, which we're going to find out today if it leaks, because I'm fairly certain it is based off of what the mass airflow readings were doing before. It's got a huge intercooler on it, way too big for what this is doing. And then let's go look at the actual turbo. So the turbo is huge. Just as reference, it's massive. I forget what the number was on it, but it's some Borg Warner truck turbo, like a diesel turbo. It's a monster. It's far too big for this car, especially with a rear mount turbo system. The lag is just incredible. We're not fixing that today. We're just trying to get the tuning done. The wastegate routing, it's literally teed into the pipe. So, you know, not any airflow going to that. It's not set up great, but we're gonna work with what we got. You know, he thinks it's cool. It looks cool. I mean, it's a nice looking car. I had to take the bumper off for me before he brought it here. It's a nice looking car. I mean, it's got, you know, the subs and this fancy sequential shifter thing. It's a nice car. It's got, you know, ducting going back to the turbo stuff. It's a nice looking car. With a smaller turbo and a couple changes in the engine bay, it'd be mint. But we're just gonna make it work for the rest of this season, and then next year we'll hit it differently. So I'm gonna go ahead and install my little device here. Plop that in. We're gonna install this so that this actually is in the car, so that nothing happens to it. Just don't want it to get hot or wet, even though it is all shrink wrapped and sealed up inside. So we're gonna run all the wires we need into the engine bay, hook everything up, get a bass tune on there, and see if this thing is gonna work on this car. Okay, so the way that we need to do this is I have the map sensor, which this manifold has like a bajillion tapped brass fittings in it for some reason. So the one that was running the blow-off valve, I took out, replaced it with that. This is what controls the meth injection, which is a very cheap generic pressure sensor. So this is on-off, which is not the right way to run a meth injection system. Anyway, so I stole where that was hooked up for the blow-off valve. We have our map sensor wire running over here. We are going to get power and ground 5 volt from here for the map sensor. And then the device itself will get power and ground from this map sensor. And then we have this, which is going to be the output to the mass airflow to the ECU. And then we have to run a signal wire back across for the map sensor, which will then join these 3 wires, which is our power, ground, and signal. I gotta get another wire just because we have signal from the MAF to the device and then back to the MAF. So, which actually we can just use this because that's what this wire is gonna be. So I need to add one more wire and then pretty it all up. Now what I'm gonna do for now is we're just gonna run it like this into the passenger seat. Once we have everything working and hooked up and the tuning is done, I will then go about looming everything, rerouting these wires into the cabin and making it look pretty. That's after. So I'm gonna go ahead and hook everything up. I gotta get one more wire, hook everything up. I got the diagrams for this car for the mass airflow sensor, so I know what wires I need to tap into. And should fire this thing up. All right, we're all hooked up. Again, it looks like a mess because I haven't loomed or cleaned up anything. This is just to get it going. So we have all of our wiring connected and run out here. And we run it into our little module here, which I have plugged into the computer so that I can monitor everything. We've got a red light in there. So everything is on. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to fire it up, make sure the car runs currently on the current map with this hooked up. It should run totally normal. Mass airflow readings should be totally normal. And then what we'll do is I was unable to get a hold of the tune that's already in the car, so I have to do the setup from scratch. But we will then start tuning, and it should be that easy. I shouldn't have said that. All right, car is on. It is idling. These are our mass airflow voltages. Both of those voltages are coming out of that module. And you can see that they match exactly on each side. Good. All right. air fuel correction's off. Again, the tune that's in here is not great, but everything appears to be working as it should. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and start up a new tune file and get started on this. Several hours later, I started tuning this thing, got it running, driving on my own tune, and I went to start actually doing the tuning process, and something was not right. So when we had this car on the dyno 2 months ago, the ignition timing was really high, and the knock sensor readings just didn't make sense, and it had an external knock count. Anyway, that's when we decided we got to do something about the tuning. Well, I'm starting to understand why it was the way it was and why the gentleman got rid of it, because the upper maps don't work. So if you've been watching the channel for a while, you will know that when we first tried tuning a Cube, which is on the other side of that Jeep, we were going to do uprev, and then we ran into an issue with the ignition timing maps, and it's exactly this issue. Notice that they're red and green with all negative numbers, with weird reference values and all that stuff. And the scaling doesn't make sense. Like when you try smoothing stuff out, it does all kinds of weird stuff. You change these values on all the timing maps. Like I went through all of them, did the same process I went through with the Cube, and it doesn't change a damn thing. So these maps are broken. Now with this being a Nismo, there's not a whole lot of these HRs that have been tuned, and it just so happens that this specific HR has a specific map that is broken. That's it. Gonna reach out to UpRev just so they know, but this is the second map we've run into in the past 2 years from UpRev that is just straight broken and doesn't work. So you'll notice we have this big old wire and harness hanging out up here. We're putting this thing on a fuel tech. Because it's an HR, we can't run any plug-in standalones, and I feel bad for the guy, kid, he's 20 years old, that this has been such a nightmare for him. It's been nothing but a pain in the butt for the past, year or so since he got the car. So I'm gonna help him out. So we're gonna put an FT450 in it. We're gonna do basically what we did on the Cube. Injector coil control through the fuel tech and let the factory ECU control the things it can, such as throttles, which will just turn electronic torque control off so that it's just 1-to-1. And the VVT, we'll let the engine run that stuff and the emission stuff. But we are going to give the real tuning juice to the fuel tech. So that's what we're gonna do. We're not gonna put a smaller turbo on it yet. We're just gonna get this thing running and driving. The car is knocking at partial throttle, and the aftermarket knock light that they had was lighting up like crazy even before we brought the car in. And I found it weird that the ECU wasn't reading any knock when the car was being driven around, but the knock light was going off. And now I know why. It probably was knocking like crazy when they originally tuned it because they couldn't pull any timing out of it. So they just went in and basically just changed the knock listening threshold and basically shut the knock sensors off and just relied on the aftermarket sensor to see if it was getting bad or not. Not the right way to do this. I mean, it's like, come on, guys. Like, it's not easy to modify these HRs. There's a reason almost nobody runs them. They're NA engine. But anyway, frustration over with. So we're gonna do the fuel tech. We're gonna swap out that blow-off valve, which is leaking like crazy. We're gonna swap that out. We're gonna get rid of the meth injection system, plug those holes up. I'm gonna do a smoke test on the intake manifold, see if there's any other major leaks that need to get sorted out. And we're gonna put a fuel tech in it. And unlike something like this white car with an FT550 in it, and we're taking total control over everything, that wiring, it's a 2-ish day job, never mind the fabricating part of it. This is only gonna take a couple hours. I keep the A harness in stock. I'll bang this out when my kid's taking a nap. This is gonna be pretty quick. The hardest part of it is I take the intake manifold off to get to the coils and injectors and stuff like that. But otherwise, it's gonna be pretty quick. So ordered up his 450 already. I have a 550 just sitting in there. That's where we're gonna put the ECU. We're gonna get this thing working right. The only kind of stinky part about this is we have to run 2 O2 sensors, one per bank, which means 2 O2 controllers, which is just expensive. So it is what it is at this point. But there's also future-proofs the car so that down the road, if he wants to put an FT550 in it and really get to the performance nitty-gritty, he can. And if he ever changes the turbo or any of the setup, it's a hell of a lot easier to tune this than it is to go in and have to tune the factory ECU, just because it's going to be full speed density. As far as this thing goes, my little device here, it worked perfect, actually. Did exactly what I wanted to do. We never got this thing into like boost, but I had messed around with the settings in that to play around with the math readings, and it worked exactly as I wanted it to. So I might release that. I might test it on a couple more cars first, but I might release that as a product. So it's not hard for me to make, and it's pretty simple for me to set up. And it would help quite a few people out, I know that. But yeah, so this wasn't as exciting a video as I thought it was. I thought there was gonna be, you know, spitting fire out the exhaust on it and all that, but there isn't. So I will get this running to Fuel Tech and we'll get back to it.